Welcome to the Imagineering Education Podcast. My name is Thomas Riddle, and I'm your host for conversations held at the crossroads of education and design. Today I'm excited to have back with us two of my dearest friends and collaborators, Mr. Kim Morrill and Mr. Chris Beyerle, both amazing teachers and Imagineering types in their own right. This is the second part of a two-part discussion on creativity, imagination, storytelling, and the importance of dreaming. If you missed our first conversation, I'd encourage you to go back where we talked a lot about creativity and imagination. Today we're going to be focused more on storytelling and the importance of having dreams, instilling dreams in your students, and also how do we maintain dreams for ourselves. But first I'd like to pick up where we left off, and if you didn't hear that part of the conversation, that's okay. We can bring you up to speed. We were talking about the importance of learning in community and not in isolation. And there's power in collaboration, and how we we're kind of wired for that human interaction. And how can we bring a lot of voices together to solve a common problem? When we left off last time, we were talking about some ways that we can enhance that experience by bringing in outside experts. You know, sometimes as teachers, we like to think that we are the sage on the stage. We are the experts in the room. But the best teachers, I think, are ready to admit to students that, no, I do not know everything. And so bringing in these experts from the community is not only a great way to model community collaboration, but also engage students in the opportunities to learn from those who are well-versed in their field. So Chris, let's pick up from that last conversation. You were talking about some examples of when you have brought people into your classroom from the outside.
Yes, thank you, Thomas. I think one of the key takeaways from having an expert or a guest come in the classroom is the mark that you're leaving on your students. You're actually giving them a face-to-face experience where they're making a connection to a possible career field that they might end up being one day. And I think that's magical. That's powerful right there. Especially when you hear the students say, you know what? I like what I heard. I could see myself doing that job one day. Mm-hmm. Or I see myself being happy doing that job one day. And that, I think, is huge. When you are asking students to take on the role of an engineer, of a scientist, and you actually bring those folks in the classroom, putting a face to what you're talking about, I think that is huge for a student. And they're going to remember that. That's going to make that lesson, that project, that's going to be memorable on the life of a child. And I think that's what we need to look at as educators is, where are those opportunities, where are those moments that you can leave a mark on a child that's going to be a lasting impression, that's going to make a memory in their mind and kind of remove that barrier. I think when we talk about it, it's a little bit out of touch, a little bit out of reach. But when they come in your classroom, it's not so far-fetched. It's something that, hey, this is possible.
Right. That's so powerful, especially for kids who maybe never thought they would ever have a chance to hold that role or be that person. Inspiring them to aspire to have a dream, to move beyond their current circumstance is so important. You know, it's funny. Today, I just got a tweet on our Imagineering Ed Twitter account from Mama Michelle that tagged Disney Imagination in this tweet as well. And it was a picture of her 8-year-old who was watching the Imagineering in a Box. No, excuse me, I'm sorry. It was the Imagineering series on Disney Plus, which is, I cannot recommend to you highly enough. If you have not seen that series, if you have Disney Plus, I would definitely recommend watching that. But she says this: 8-year-old Bubs is inhaling the Imagineering story as part of his 3rd grade artist research project on Mary Blair, who of course is a legendary Imagineer. He turned and said, "I want to do that when I grow up." Wow. And then she said, do you have any age limits for interns?
Yeah.
With celebration horns and, praise hands and stuff, because that's what it's about. And sparking that vision, that one little spark of inspiration, from Figment. Yeah. So, Ken, what were you saying about the bringing in the experts? I think you have some really strong feelings on this.
Oh, yeah, totally. When I bring in a speaker in, I love to give them an introduction. I always feel awkward doing it, but I feel like they deserve these, to be treated like they're this grand guest. And then I take a seat in the front row because, one, I love hanging on every one of their words. There's no way I will ever be the expert that they are in whatever their field is. And if they're in my classroom, I want to be there and learn as much as the kids are. I want to learn together. I want the kids to see that we're learning together. And I was reflecting on that in either a blog post or an email to parents, and it really struck me that what I was really doing in that instance was, while I was learning, I was also demonstrating to my students that I, as a 42-year-old teacher, am still learning. Right. And I think the value of them seeing their teachers as lifelong learners, not just as telling them that we are, but also showing them by being in that situation with them. But it also humbled me because then I became the learner, and I wasn't the sage on the stage. I wasn't this person that everyone should be listening to. I was a person who was listening. And I think both of those are key. Like, show the kids we can listen, and show the kids we don't know everything. We know we're still learning, and we're enjoying it, and we're taking pride in it, and it's something that's making us all better together.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Do you find that your students' engagement level is higher when you have someone in from the outside?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. And I think when you talk to experts, you want to also ask in what capacity can they be support. Sometimes it's just coming in and doing a talk and demo. Sometimes it's doing a workshop or a lesson on how to measure or how to do a certain skill. Sometimes it's tutoring or mentoring. Sometimes it's giving feedback on the work, and or sometimes it could just be being part of the final audience where students present their work to the public, and you have your panel of experts there to really be the ones giving feedback to see if they applied the learning that they presented to the students. I think that's kind of the key, is getting as much support as you can in whatever the expert or guest is willing to give. So
I will say this too about Chris's classroom. For those of you listening, Chris is on the ground floor of our flagship STEAM school in Greenville County, Fisher Middle School. And I was very blessed to have an opportunity to help work on some of the early ideas for that middle school. And as such, one of the rooms I was most excited about seeing utilized in the future was the room that would become Chris Beyerle's classroom, because it has a roll-up door, a garage door. Okay, so we have a lot of glass in this building, a lot of windows, very open, community learning hubs, really made for creating collaborative experiences for students. But Chris's classroom was one I was very jacked about, because I kept thinking to myself, and I was telling people we could bring a car in. You can roll a car in.
When we met,
so when Chris is talking about bringing in community partners, this is not for everyone. Does not have this opportunity. I completely understand, but Chris is able to actually roll that door up and bring in automobiles.
Right, and if you go back to our first episode when we talked about that question, what does the future of mobility look like? We brought in a car. We brought in a vehicle. Fortunately. A few. Race car.
Half of a vehicle even.
Yeah. A prototype vehicle. But we got to bring in a Tesla, which was pretty amazing. One of the Model X's with the doors that come up. And students got to see, companies that are thinking about the future, thinking about, alternative energies and robotics and sensors and that kind of thing. If I go back to the question about the importance, or what is the role of experts, one of the things I wanted to do with my automation robotics students is possible careers. Where would you do the stuff that we're doing in the classroom? So why not bring in people that do the robotics to do that work. And I think no greater guest, I would say, would be, someone from the bomb squad. So I invited some of our local bomb squad team to come in, where they came
Greenville
in
County Sheriff's
from Greenville County.
Department.
Yeah. So I'm really thankful that they could be such a great support. They came in, they talked to the students at their level, which was great, about what are the possible careers? How do you get into something like this? Because I think that job is not a popular job.
Right.
There's not people banging on the door to get to that job. But the students got to feel like they were on the bomb squad that day. They
Talk about
got,
danger.
Yeah. They got
We
to
talked about danger, learning, dangerous learning in our first episode as well. So.
well,
Chris
in
takes
their
it
eyes,
very
maybe it
seriously.
was the case, but they were totally safe.
Oh yeah. No,
So they
no live ammo.
took the controller. They got to drive it around. They got to understand the difference between torque and speed. They got to see it on the ground. They got to see it go up the stairs. They got to see how it records and how it uses sensors. Truly, truly hands-on, face-to-face experience. And I don't think they're going to forget that. It was memorable.
Well, let me ask you this question then. When you bring in guests like that, and you brought in a Tesla. So, Mr. Musk, if you're listening, Elon, you are welcome to come to Greenville anytime. We invite you to Chris Beyerle's classroom, where he is creating students that you would love to have work for you one day.
Yeah.
But when you, in all seriousness, when we talk about these experiences, are your students, should I bring this word up, are they entertained? Is it entertaining to them as well? Sometimes we think of entertainment as bad in education. Are they entertained?
I think as educators, you have to switch on that role at times, knowing when to wear that hat. And I think there are moments for entertainment for sure. And I think you have to allow for those to happen when they do happen, because there's learning. There's learning in entertainment, and sometimes learning is not always fun, but sometimes there are moments of fun. And
Right.
I think one of our challenges that our principal gave us is, how do you sprinkle in the fun this year? How do you, and that's our challenge every year, is how do you sprinkle in the fun through the projects that we do?
Yeah.
Because we're our audience, we have to remember our audience. We're competing with PlayStation and Xbox and TikTok and YouTube.
Right.
And we need to remember that they can easily switch us off if they want to. We have to be just as competitive, I feel like, if we're going to give them the opportunities that they need. And
I'd say having a chance to get my hands on a Tesla or the engine, or tool around with a robot that detonates bombs, is pretty dadgum engaging. That actually, listening to you speak reminds me of something I heard an Imagineer once say about Walt, was that he didn't draw a line between education and entertainment. He just wanted people to be engaged by what was going on. And the engagement is the piece. And what I'm sitting here listening to you guys say is they're entertained because they are engaged.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you got to look for those moments to draw them in, to go big. And
The teachable moments as well as planning them. It's because you planned these things. You planned these events. So it's finding the opportunities to sprinkle them in. Years ago, I learned from a very wise teacher about what she called post-holing. And she grew up on a farm, and she said one of her memories as a child was going out and digging post holes with her dad to put up fences. And so she had the old post hole diggers, if you know what I'm talking about, and has to dig them down and throw them down in there, and there's like two shovels combined into one, and dig by hand a hole to put a post in to build a fence. And she said, when we did that, we would go deep in the ground, and then we would skim the surface to the next hole, and then we would go deep in the ground, and then we would skim the surface and pass over to the next hole, and then we would go deep. And her point was this. She said, there are times when you're teaching when you intentionally plan for those deep learning experiences. And you have to plan for them. Now, we always have those pop-up teachable moments, but it's being intentional to plan for those deep teaching moments. And then if you do that, understand, you can't plow. This is not plowing, because if you plowed, you'd be slow and it would be digging up the entire, you'd be going deep the whole time and you'll never get to the end. But she said, go deep and then understand you're going to skim the surface, and then until the next opportunity to go deep. And so it's that, to your point, Chris, about sprinkling those moments in, it made me think of Miss Satterfield and going deep and being intentional to plan those experiences. Ken, you're about to say something.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think if you do depth the entire time, you exhaust the learner, and you become an exhausted person who then is no longer fun to be around.
Right.
But I was also laughing because the first time I ever cussed in front of my father was when we were putting up barbed wire fences, and that analogy really strikes.
See, it goes back to our last week's podcast when we were talking about those memories that are attached to emotion. They stick. Right. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, and I think kids are engaged, and I don't know about entertained. I don't often consider the word entertained. Well, I have very specific moments when I need to be entertaining and I want to be entertaining. And I have very specific moments where it's, let's come together, and this isn't about entertainment, it's about reflection. But when we have speakers, I think the kids are engaged. And there's a couple of reasons. We teach middle school. I think they're partially looking engaged because they're wondering, I don't know this person. I've never tested them once in my life.
Right.
I don't know what I'll get away with, so I'll just listen.
Or I can't look like I'm enjoying this too much because I lose my cred.
Right, yeah.
I got street cred.
Then Mr. Morrill will know that I can do it.
Or I actually care.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So can I share, we did a school-wide project. Ken and I were part of this planning team where we brought in the community. We brought in our local water renewal facility that cleans wastewater. And the whole premise of this project was to do a school-wide project, but we wanted to have students understand the value of water, the value of clean water. And so in conversation with this organization, REWA, they said, we can support you in doing this 5K Walk for Water event. And so with their partnership and our school, and Ken was on the team as well, where we kind of planned out what this 5K event was going to look like. And there was definitely those moments where we wanted it to be student-centered. We wanted the students to have fun. We wanted them to walk and have a good time. We talked about having these different stations where they were learning about access to clean water and how some villages in Africa don't have it right in their toilets. They don't have running water nearby. They have to walk miles and miles to get clean water. And so this is a community project. It involved the whole school, involved the teachers, and it was definitely something I feel like students were going to remember. But they were definitely engaged because they were a part of the event. They were part of, number one, the walk, the 5K, but they were also part of the activities that went along with that umbrella of theme of clean water. And so we had different activities for science and math and English that went around the idea of clean water. And so I feel like that was one of our solid projects that students definitely were engaged, and they were tired at the end of the day.
Right.
They were tired,
but they remembered.
They remembered exactly.
Yeah. So we're talking about an interdisciplinary, community-based, hands-on learning experience for an entire school that was also standards-based. That's doable. So for you friends out there who would love to participate in opportunities like this, we encourage you. And you can contact us and we can give you some guidance on how to do so. But those learning experiences, especially if you get them beyond the walls of the school, so powerful. I can't encourage teachers enough to pursue that. I have a question. Oh, Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think there's a ton of ways to do that now. I think we are both just so distracted by our technology, and it's so important to be able to find the right technology. going back to the projects that get kids entertained or entertain kids, but also engage them, I would draw sometimes there's a line. Like if they're entertained, they're engaged. But if they're engaged, it's not necessarily entertained. But I had my students working on my 8th graders were working on a spray painting graffiti project. And I've done this over and over and over with many, many schools. And this year, because we had the VR system working, we were learning about Shepard Fairey, who's from Charleston, works in LA now, and Banksy. Banksy is a world-renowned graffiti artist.
And Shepard Fairey is?
Shepard Fairey, he runs the Obey brand now, T-shirts, but he does huge murals that are based on whatever social cause he's interested in at that moment. And I wanted the kids to get engaged with some kind of social cause that they could take and do something big with. We were going to do like 4 foot by 4 foot spray paintings using stencils. I can't get my kids out to see Banksy or Shepard Fairey because they don't exist in our area, in our culture. But using the power of virtual reality, after I had the kids do a web quest and on this 2D screen, they're, I see what these artists have done. Went into Google Earth VR in the Oculus Rift S, and I found the Waldorf. So I found a walking tour of the Waldorf in Google Earth because people have done photospheres, and then I found the Waldorf Hotel in Palestine. That is a project Banksy just worked on, and thankfully in this hotel people had done photospheres. All I had to do was find it on the streets of Palestine and walk into the hotel. Oh, you can walk up to the hotel, but then you can zoom in to the photospheres of people in the rooms that Banksy was part of redesigning. And it's called the Walled-Off Hotel because it's at the wall between Palestine and Israel. And what a powerful thing that was for the kids to have already heard about this. And then they can put this VR headset on and they're there. They're in Palestine. They're seeing people who they've never met before in their room with them. It almost feels like this very close experience with another person because they've invited you in to their space to see this thing that's now an icon of the world. Presidents have gone to see the Waldorf. But then the Scamley Conference is always in Myrtle Beach.
And explain what that is.
So Scamley is South Carolina Association of Middle-Level Educators. Fisher Middle School is proud to be members of it. And a whole bunch of us, probably 20 of us, went to Myrtle Beach to the conference this year. And Dave Burgess of Teach Like a Pirate was one of the speakers. I saw him 2 times. Brilliant. And Principal Kefele, who runs his own podcast, was one of the speakers. Both of them floored me with how they wanted us to be with the kids and how story-based and how personal. Because for so long in my career it was, stand back. You don't want to tell them too much. Don't let them be a part of your social media scene. Keep this personal distance. And now it's like, oh no, we need you to be part of their world, which is great. So in the past, I've decorated my car as the DeLorean time machine from Back to the Future, and I had my kids write all over it with magic marker. No, not magic markers, erasable markers. That would be terrible. So this year, after seeing both of them speak, I was like, well, I've got all this spray paint in my classroom, but I'm not letting them touch it. So here's what I'm going to do. We use these as props. Thanks for that, Dave Burgess. Props to you, my friend. It's like that. So I took all the spray paint and put it in a box with a sign that said, danger, do not touch. These are for weapons of mass. I don't remember what I said.
Instruction.
Yeah, well, it wasn't. It was something like being a bad guy, like separating from society and being your own person and scrawling in spray paint across the wall what you truly feel. And the kids came in, and a few of them recognized. They're like, "What's that? We can't touch it." Normally they would just touch anything, but that sign was really I think they thought it was funny. So like, we're going to play along a little bit. They come in, they sit down, I walk in, and I was like freaking out. What they didn't know is I hope they're not listening because I want to do this again next year. I had already gone to my assistant principal, the only one left on campus. That morning I run in carrying a bunch of spray paint under my arm. I was like, Miss Kane, hey, I got a favor to ask you. I need you in on this. I need the kids to think you're not in on this, and I need you to come out in the courtyard and bust me at about, it was like, I don't remember, 9:05 a.m. She's like, okay. She's laughing. I think she just will just go along with anything at this point. She's like, it's middle school.
Right.
It's third quarter. We got to do something. Okay, I'll come bust you. I said, but what I need you to do, I'm going to be shaking this can of spray paint, just about to teach the kids how to tag some stuff. And we had brought out a bunch of paper. So we'll go back into my classroom. I prepared her for this. I'm looking over my shoulder, like real nervous. The kids see me looking nervous, like, what's going on? Are you okay? I was like, I don't know, guys. I'm doing something, and I don't know if it's okay, but we got to do it today. Mr. Smith is not on campus. We've got to do this now. If we don't do it now, we lose our chance. This
They
is our
thought you
window.
were going to tag the school.
Oh, yeah. Well, they didn't even know about the spray paint yet because I had the box closed.
Okay.
They just don't touch it. So, but they knew what we were studying. And I opened the box, and I pulled them out. And to the kids who I know I need to engage most, I was like, throw this in your bag, throw that in your bag, throw that in your bag. And I throw them these cans of spray paint. They're like, what? They're freaking out. I was like, no, do it now. Get silent. Put them in your backpack. Carry your backpack. We're going to the courtyard. You and you grab these rolls of paper. And they're like, what? And they get excited. Like, nope. I need you in a straight line, acting the most polite you've ever seen. And then I was like, wait. It's going to look suspicious. I need you guys to talk quietly, kind of weaving in and out of line until we get to the courtyard. Then I need you to immediately spread out these pieces of paper, grab your spray paint, shake it up. It takes a minute to shake it up. Make sure it's shaken well. I will be instructing you as you're shaking. And then I went to reach down to tag my piece of paper to teach them, and Miss Kane comes out in the courtyard. And I had instructed the kids, if you see her, you put it in your hoodie. And they're like, okay. So she comes out, she grabs my can of spray paint. She says, Mr. Morrill, what's this? I didn't think it'd be a big problem. I didn't want to burden you. I'm teaching the kids to spray paint. She's like, I don't think that's appropriate for middle school. Do you? And she's kind of chastising me a little bit. I was like, I don't know. Sometimes I think it's just better to ask for forgiveness later. She's like, you and I are going to have a talk in my office later today.
So the kids thought you were busted.
Oh, they totally thought I was busted. She reaches down, tags the paper, drops the can of spray paint, and walks off. And the kid's like, what? And then because I want to push the boundary, but Miss Kane, can we spray paint out here right now? She goes, you make a decision based on how badly you want your job. I'm like, what? We didn't practice that. She just said it. I was like, yes. And it was awesome. I mean, that was in a totally immersive situation where we brought in danger, but still had permission. But it was the kids didn't know. They were thrown into this situation immediately. So fun, entertaining. They loved it. They talked to their friends about it the rest of the day.
So when did you tell them that it was just an act?
I waited about a week.
Oh, really? That long?
A week. Yeah, I waited a week.
Wow.
And the culmination
So
of
what
that,
you were trying to do wasn't tag the building, was tag on paper.
Right, paper, yeah.
On paper, right.
yeah,
Gotcha.
which they knew, but they were still like, but we're spray painting at school.
Right.
And what that whole project was going to culminate in me coating my car in this clear coat spray peel off stuff, and they were going to bomb my car. Like the entire, not the windows, but they were going to bomb my whole car.
For those who do not know about bombing, we're not talking about explosives. We're talking about painting.
Don't bring in the bomb squad.
No. We're talking about painting. So what you did was you created an immersive experience for them that was actually a story.
Right.
That's kind of over the course of our conversation. I've heard a lot about stories. Both of you talking about that. Everything in Disney is based on a story. Disneyland originally was a way to bring Walt's stories off the silver screen and then bring us into their reality and make it real. And then every ride, every attraction in a Disney theme park has a story to it. Pass-through areas between attractions have stories to them. One thing that Imagineering education we believe firmly in is the power of story and creating these storytelling experiences. It sounds like both of you agree with that. So what role does story play, do you think, in classrooms or in learning? We'll start with you, Chris.
So I think I can give an example of one of the projects that we did. If you have seen the movie The Martian,
right,
and where you have Mark Watney going to Mars, trying to survive, and coming back to Earth, we did a whole project based on the premise of what would it be like to live on Mars, and how would you survive? And students got to put on the hat of NASA or as an astronaut and imagine what would they need? Would they need a Walmart or a Chick-fil-A? Are those realistic needs if you're trying to survive on Mars?
Right.
Or maybe you just need some food and oxygen,
Potatoes.
or protection from radiation. So their job was to create a habitat for a colony for Mars. And so students first went through a brainstorming phase. We went through some ideation of what would we need, what would it look like, having drawings out, and what would that building or dwelling be for? Would that be your medical building? Would it be for law? Are you going to create a whole new legal system for Martians? They had to really rethink what it would be like to live on this planet. And so they brainstormed, and then they developed some ideas for what their prototypes were going to look like. So they started 3D modeling what their colonies are going to be like. And we did this as a team. So they were in teams of 4. And so each person had a role and responsibility within that team. All had to do with survival for that colony. And after 3D modeling, they made little habitats, and we 3D printed them. And they were engaged. They were totally immersed, trying to figure out what would they need, what would this look like. And I had some kids coming in every single morning before school, trying to work on their 3D model, trying to get something printed. I had even added the challenge of what would their transportation look like on Mars? What would their rover look like? Would it be a rover, or would it be like a maglev track or something like that? And so they ended up presenting to the community, to the parents, to visitors. They got all dressed up. They talked about their ideas. They talked about what life might look like. It was basically that story that we saw from The Martian. And I kind of showed a little bit of clip of that for them to really immerse themselves in what that was going to be like. And it was fun. It was neat. One of the other cool things that I was able to get kids to do is we have a large Martian map. We have a huge map of Mars, so big that it takes up the whole room, and they can walk on it.
Thanks to the Aldrin Foundation.
Yeah, thanks to the Aldrin Foundation. So they could walk on it, and they can choose, hey, where would you want to live? So we started off with that question, and had to kind of pick based on what they saw on the map. So thinking geography, would they live close to the poles or the equator? We talked about earthquakes, or are earthquakes called earthquakes on Mars because it's an earthquake? It's, and if they, geologists study what rocks on Earth, what's a geologist on Mars? Is it called the same thing?
Right.
So there's a lot of questions that come up from that, but it came from just that story of what would life be like on Mars?
Right.
What would it be like to live there and survive?
Ken, what do you think about stories?
I think
Why are stories important?
Yeah, I kind of touched on this in the first episode. That we've sort of lost a common culture. The stories used to be what bound us. They created broad cultures. It was telling the stories of us, and we've kind of moved away from that in the era of social media, being able to find these little tiny niches where we fit in, and we just kind of bury into that. And I think also YouTube has so much content that you can find your way out of what used to be family time or church time or wherever we heard our cultural stories.
Right.
But I think bringing the story into the classroom at least bonds that class to commonality. It creates culture within that classroom around which we now share these ideas and these hopes and these experiences so we can move forward. When we have students coming from so many different directions now, different cultures, even locally, but then different cultures and how they spend their time through hobbies and what they watch online, anytime we can tell a story that contextualizes that learning for a kid, but also brings back that emotional connection. Because if you're talking about survival, I mean, you look at Maslow's hierarchy, survival's needs are down here, and then emotional needs are a little higher, but they're still in a different place. And I think what a story does is combines them. Your survival and your emotional needs are all part of the same thing, creating that culture. So I guess an example of that, it's a lot like Chris's, but mine kind of turned into two different things. I think it was the year 2011 or 2012. I contextualized my classroom as the year 2065, and there was a battle between the Earth Space Alliance, which was the Earth overlords, and then the Martian Colonial Federation. Totally ripped off Star Wars.
Right.
And this is how I became part of Star Wars in the Classroom, actually, in Rogue 66, because of this. Ripped off Star Wars, took that story and said, all right, guys, we got to survive this. Pick a side. And then within that side, and also every revolution throughout history, we then had to connect those through history classes. Got some teachers on board. As they talked about the American Revolution, we're like, hey, which side are you on, by the way? And some kids were like, ESA. And some kids were like, I'm a Martian colonialist. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, does this sound familiar? They're like, wait a minute, Mr. Morrill didn't make this up. So they're then making these connections to their history class.
Right.
And then they had to develop these, sort of like Chris's class did. You got to develop whatever it is you need in 2065 for your side to win. Some students made weaponry, and they didn't necessarily start off by making the real thing. They 3D modeled these things. Right. And they started with sketches, then 3D modeling, and then they had to write descriptions of their products. What is this thing you're making? Why do people need it? And the ELA teachers were in charge of those students. So we had these commanders-in-chief for each different area of the school, and the ELA teachers were coaching the kids through how to write their descriptions of their product. And you can't just say it's the cheapest thing, because then people believe it's going to break, but it's all, like, how do you know? And then math gets involved, because these kids need to know how much it's going to cost to build and deploy their stuff. What are the shipping costs? What are the materials costs? So they were building budgets in their math class. And the story was just a focal point. If we didn't do that, they'd be learning these non-contextualized things in all their classes anyway. But what the story did was bring a focal point to what the kids were doing. And at the end of the year, to make it something that they could be proud of, that they had to work toward, we had a trade show and angel investor event. So the superintendent for the schools was there. That was awesome. His assistants were there. So shout out to Miss Dean, Tara Dean, and a bunch of other people who came. She now works for Greenville County. And George Ward was my principal, also works for Greenville County now. They were super supportive of it. They were there. George was my principal at the time. He really made sure that the community came in. They invited their parents. We invited all the speakers we had throughout the year who taught us how to be innovative thinkers and create or whatever it is we're creating. And then people got to invest. Each person who walked through those doors was greeted by one of our students, walked into an intro spot where they learned about what we had done throughout the year, and then offered 1 million SMS bucks to go in and invest 1 million SMS bucks wherever they saw fit. And before they could do that, they had to go through our AR tour. So we had iPads, and this was the early days of iPads. Only 2 of them had GPS. So we also had an external GPS for the other one. But we had geolocated all of the 3D models that the kids made into the courtyard of the school. So through the iPad, you were seeing life-size versions of what they were creating. And you could walk into the shipping, the big ships that they had made. You could walk into the shipping compartment. You could walk into the cockpit. And it was so immersive. One of the kids actually tried to sit down in the chair of the cockpit. It's just not the holodeck, guys.
Yeah. You did one for Back to the Future, too. You did one for going back to the 60s or something. Did you not, too? Were you going into like a little arcade or?
Oh yeah, we did the 80s pop-up museum at Riverside Middle School.
80s pop-up museum was awesome. Yeah, and what's really cool is when I'm sitting here listening to you talk, you know, this goes back to my TED talk I did a number of years ago about with that question, what if we design schools like Disney designs theme parks? Mm-hmm. And what you guys are talking about is using technology to tell stories. But it's not the technology. It's not for the sake of technology. It's the story first. And the emotional connection, the community experience revolves around the story. And we just use technology as tools to help provide that immersive emotional experience. But what you're doing is you're Imagineering education. You're Imagineering a learning experience. We've just got a couple more minutes here. I want to get to this question real quick because it's very important. One thing that I firmly believe in is the creation of what I would call critical dreamers. Always as educators, we spend a lot of time talking about critical thinkers. And I think we don't need to do too much explanation about that. Being able to think critically, rationally, applying, our knowledge in a very practical way. And that is needed. That's a goal in most schools. But critical dreamers, how do we create students that can dream? And how do we create a space for those dreams to remain in ourselves? What do you think about dreaming in education? What's the importance?
I would say it's huge, especially when it comes to hope. I think storytelling has that component of hope, which we all need. We all need it, especially right now in the world that we live in with so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
I hear when Ken was talking and I was talking, I kept hearing these elements of survival, being a survivalist or getting through hardships. And I think we all like to, going back to the storytelling just for a second,
You're right.
is just seeing us get through the hardships. And I think storytelling shows us that it's doable. There is hope. There is a possibility. And there's usually that relatable character that we can connect with at an emotional level, that we can see, I can do this. I can see their struggle similar to my struggle, and I can get through this. So dreaming being important as if I can see myself overcoming the challenges in my life, in my class. But as educators, I think it's important. We're allowing students to have an outlet or an experience or an opportunity where they're given a chance to write, to draw, to create, to build, to make something where it connects with them at an emotional level. It connects them with their interests and their desires. But I think it gives them a sense of hope and pride that maybe this is something I can make a living from, or I can feel a sense of pride because I know that the work that I'm doing is good. It's awesome. But I think one of the big parts there is the hope piece.
Right.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's education or schools or teachers are blamed for kids just not even thinking anymore, or just like we have some agenda and we're brainwashing them.
Right.
But what I would say is that's not true. I think what we've done for so much of schooling is taught kids to learn facts. There's facts that change sometimes, but learn these facts. And then we moved into critical thinking, which is to get kids to learn how to think for themselves and recognize problems in the world or recognize ways to learn. I think the beauty of creative dreaming, or of critical dreaming, is that they now are chasing their hopes and their dreams through education, that they're learning to do the things that matter to them, that they care about. Our culture is so much about consumption. And I've always tried to teach my students not just to be passive consumers, but active creators. And so many of them have trouble with that because they don't know how to recognize their dreams. If I ask a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you care about? What do you hope for? So often I don't know, because they don't often have that space to think about it. What they're given space for is fact and thinking, but not so much dreaming and hoping. So many of them will say, I want $1 million, or I want a new phone. Like, that's not a dream. That's not a dream. Your dream is, what do you hope the world becomes, and how are you going to be a part of that? So I think dreaming has a place in our schools to not get rid of critical thinking, but definitely get rid of reliance on just walking away with a head full of facts.
Right.
But also take that critical thinking and do something great with it to advance yourself in the world, to go out and build something that's way cooler than anything you can even imagine right now.
Well,
So I guess that applies to creativity and imagination too.
Yeah, with dreams, we have Disney World. We have places. We've gone to the moon. I mean, that's because of dreams. There's the whole moonshot thinking idea is, how can we make this happen? How can we do it? How can we go explore the moon? How can we go explore Mars? And that starts with dreams.
We have movement toward racial equality, from Gandhi to Martin Luther King Jr. to people who are still activists in civil rights, which is
And I think that's one of the other key pieces is just, as educators, how do we remove the barriers? We want to have equity in education, and are we providing students those opportunities and helping them remove the barriers that they might set up themselves or set up because of cultural norms or taboos or whatever it is. I had a student I know, she was facing a barrier, and after talking with her, I found out that her dog had died. I think she just needed someone to acknowledge the fact that this is what she was dealing with and going through. We were working on a puzzle project, and she was just not interested. She was not engaged with it. I did find out that she was engaged with sprites, like video game sprites. And so I had her work on those instead. And that moment kind of just lit a switch where she just became engaged and started working on these sprites. And that became her project. And I gave her that outlet to be creative, to follow that dream that she had. But I think it stems from kind of removing the barriers or allowing her or giving her permission that was okay. And I think as educators, we need to look for more of those opportunities where we're saying, yes, it's okay. Let's try it. What if we did this? What could you do? What could you make?
To the extent that it's within our power to remove those barriers that would prohibit kids from dreaming big dreams and thereby losing hope. Yeah, that's good stuff. I recently heard Dave Filoni, Dave Filoni is the amazing director, creator, writer of the Clone Wars, and he's also directing The Mandalorian. And Dave was a protege of George Lucas. And when I hear the word hope, I think of Star Wars. And the reason that Lucas created Star Wars or wrote Star Wars, one of those things he said is, it came out in 1977. So you're talking about it was written in the early 70s. Think about the world in the early 70s. And Lucas has said that children had lost their heroes. He grew up with heroes, and that kids that he saw at that time, I was one of those. Culturally, those stories we told were disaster films. They were anti-heroes, and there was no hope. And so Lucas says that he wanted to provide for a new generation hope. And of course, episode 4 is called A New Hope. And what I heard Filoni say about Lucas was that Lucas kind of has passed the torch to Filoni, to Dave. And he told Dave, remember to give kids hope because they really need it. And that's what that story is really all about. And those big stories that as world cultures always embrace are the ones that encourage hope. So guys, wow, thanks for a great conversation. Thanks for being here with me today.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, for having us. We appreciate it.
No, I want to have you back.
To be here.
Yeah, honor's all mine. Love to have you back. And we have a few questions that we didn't get to for these two gentlemen. And if it's okay with you guys, I'll give you those questions and you can write your responses and we'll put them over on our blog.
Great.
Is that okay with you guys?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So be looking for those. You can access our blog at imagineeringedu.com. And you can read that blog and a lot of others having to do with topics on a variety of subjects, but always centering around creativity and education. So thanks again for joining us for this week's episode. Again, if you'd like to learn more about our work, visit imagineeringedu.com, and we hope that you'll join us next time for the Imagineering Education Podcast. This is Thomas Riddle. I've been your host and look forward to having you tune in again. Have a blessed day.